All right, Packer fans, I am Austin Krueger kicking off some NFL draft content for Cheesehead TV leading up to the draft later in April. We'll drop a couple videos up until that point with some details around or some insights around what the Packers could be looking at. Today we'll go over some Senior Bowl standouts, some highlights that are in line with maybe some positions the Packers will be looking at early in the draft. Otherwise, we'll be looking at some positional breakdowns, who makes sense, some needs, how Gutekunst might need to think about the draft this year. But like I said, let's jump right into it because we have a couple names to highlight today from the Senior Bowl at positions that will make sense for the Packers in the draft, thinking rounds 2, 3, possibly 1. Never know. One being defensive tackle. Noticeable standout from Senior Bowl. Under the radar kind of a player, someone who's always been a rotational guy throughout his college careers. Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee, defensive tackle. Obviously, big-time interior disruptor here. He's definitely a sleeper prospect. Definitely a winner from Senior Bowl practices this week. Mentioned as one of the biggest sleepers in this draft, in fact. But throughout the Senior Bowl, had some really strong one-on-one drill performances. Has a hell of a quick step for someone of his size, over 300 pounds. His play is also very urgent. He uses his hands like an actual weapon in pass rush. I kind of as seen by an 81.5, 81.5 PFF pass rush grade last season with an elite, very, very nice looking 18.8% pass rush win rate from Norman Lott. Again, kind of always been a rotational player at Tennessee, though, and throughout that has still been able to put up 5 sacks in each of his last 2 seasons. So still finding the production, even with the lack of snaps coming out of Tennessee. But he has also increased his hurries. So funny enough, 2024, Lott played fewer snaps than he did in 2023, but he came away improving his hurries from 7 to 13. And I think the only thing here for Lott that, I'm not sure he's going to be the best fit for the Packers defensive tackle-wise is he's very similar to Devontae Wyatt in the sense if he's better off the field on obvious rundowns. He's definitely more of a B-gap type of a defensive tackle with some over-the-tackle stuff, which, again, that's just Wyatt, Brooks, Wood, and it's something they really have a lot of already in that defensive tackle room, why maybe he's not the best fit. But that said, this is about Senior Bowl players who stood out kind of at positions the Packers need. Norman Lott is definitely one of them. Should the Packers decide we want to add a defensive tackle, I think getting Norman Lott maybe in the 3rd round, it's a very good spot for him. I'm not sure I would want to use a 2nd rounder. Azarai Thomas. Again, could be saying that wrong, and that is my apologies. But Azarai Thomas is another guy who's been jumping up draft boards lately, moving maybe into the 1st round, better suited for the 2nd round, potentially. But definitely known for having really strong coverage skills, is a draft riser, has some abilities that are going to be really helpful for him, but he's become a popular 1st or 2nd round draft target recently, especially after a strong week at the Senior Bowl. He's freaking huge, too. So 6'2", 200 pounds, and he absolutely looks every bit of it. You see him drop down and press man and then kind of rise up. It's just like, oh, my God, he just became huge. So definitely a big fella. Played a ton of man coverage under DB coach Pat Surtain at Florida State. Similar to some other recent FSU corners that were drafted last year who actually went on to have some strong rookie seasons, Renardo Green and Jarian Jones. So that DB room keeps producing. Pat Surtain doing a hell of a job with Florida State in that room. Specifically with Thomas, the physical gifts, yeah, they absolutely show up in press man coverage. Run support as well, another big asset to his game. But he's a very willing and capable tackler in that aspect, has no issues going in to take down a ball carrier. But his biggest strength is definitely causing disruption at the catch point. But that also kind of leads into some weaknesses where he has some difficulties tracking, and I would say similar to like Eric Stokes with the Packers. He needs his vertical speed to come through in those type of instances where he isn't tracking well to still get him in a position to make a pass breakup. So some instances on tape where a wide receiver can stack him vertically, it's spelled trouble for Thomas. Another indicator with the lack of really ball skills is only having 1 interception in the last 2 seasons. So he's just not consistently positioning him enough positioning himself enough to break up passes, which is a shame because when he is in position to break up a pass, he generally will break up a pass. Last season only had a minus 77.9 PFF coverage grade, but he does play a ton of outside corner, which the Packers need. He plays with really good fluidity, especially for his size, but he does kind of lack that sudden twitchiness, the twitchy burst to his game. But being that he has limitations in zone coverage and issues tracking the ball, he's really going to be best served for a man-heavy scheme in the NFL, which Jeff Hafley was very much not in 2024, playing a whopping 78.3% of snaps in zone coverage. So additionally, under that, Thomas as a fit in Green Bay, not totally sure he's the best fit unless Hafley has plans to kind of start leaning more into more zone man coverage next season. In that sense, Thomas will still likely need a year or two to kind of get developed into a man-heavy scheme that's going to be best fit for him. But to potentially become a high-level starter earlier in his career, that scheme will be good, and he kind of needs that time to really figure out how to be best positioned to break up a pass, have some better tracking skills, because he's definitely lacking there, and that is obviously an important part to being a top corner in the NFL is not getting burnt up top, not getting stacked, and if you do get stacked, still being able to make a play. He just has some troubles, and he needs to kind of pick up those technicalities of the position still. But staying on the position of cornerback, another guy at the Senior Bowl who kind of stood out, had a nice week. He's definitely rising, is Maxwell Hairston, cornerback out of Kentucky. He really drew attention this past week in the Senior Bowl for his coverage skills during one-on-one drills. Throughout his career, he's really been best in zone coverage. Back to what might fit well for someone coming into Green Bay. Someone like Hairston, who has played around 400 snaps, I believe. Yeah, around 400 snaps the past 2 seasons in zone coverage at Kentucky. Plays very physical as well, which is a huge asset. Pops the hell out of receivers. Can disrupt the timing with that. Very physical. A lot of reminiscence of Carrington Valentine as well for the Packers. Just with a very fiery style of play and willingness to be physical, and then absolutely going to let you know about it after he gives you a little bit of the business. But really what you look for in terms of a prototypical ball hawking type of profile, 6 interceptions the last 2 seasons, mostly thanks to 5 in 2023, but just a ton of success in terms of his ability to anticipate and jump passes. Just seems to always be around the football. One of those guys who has a knack for being around the football, which you really like to have a cornerback. Definitely does need to have a bit more discipline, though. He can get played by a quarterback in man coverage, but again, has been a wicked asset in zone coverage. Willing tackler, nothing special. Unfortunately missed a good chunk of 2024 with a shoulder injury, and that is going to be where his concerns will lie coming into the NFL. The injuries with his frame, not the biggest cat, and it was a real shame that he had to miss time because he really dominated in 2023 and was showcasing his best football. 2024 was looking good. The injury really was an unfortunate setback. But at this point, Harrison's going to chalk for a really nice third-round value. Might be able to sky up a little bit at after the combine. But as of now, he would be a nice third-round pick. Someone who is really exciting, moving on to a different position now. Not likely the Packers are looking to go offensive line again in round 1. Just anyone who throws that idea out there in a mock draft, just go ahead and disregard that and move on to the next one. But Gray Zabel, North Dakota State left tackle. There's always a cat out of NDSU who just comes in around this time and just starts putting on a clinic. Some lower division school just comes out and puts on a clinic and starts flying up boards. Zabel being one of those guys, very well. There's not a 0% chance he finds himself in the first round. More likely a second round pick, but just dominated the Senior Bowl. Vaulting his stock, like I said, roughly into that round 2 range. He's one tough SOB. It shows up on film all the time. If you want that mauler, that angry guy coming in, he matches that Packers physicality that they've now found recently. That I'm sure they're going to want to keep stacking with the likes of Tucker Kraft, Josh Jacobs. You get a guy like Zabel in, is absolutely going to bring that heat and that mentality. The one-on-one drill dominance, not losing any battles in the Senior Bowl week of practices, showcasing just a great power, great speed in all practices. I mean, you got a lineman here who can really do it all. He did have some problems with penalties in 2023, cleaned it up. His tape looks clean. He's even more impressive against the best pass rushers he's faced, which is a huge perk to him. The better talent he faces, it seems he steps up in those moments, and that's exactly the type of player, especially at offensive line, that team can look for. Speaking of teams looking for a specific type of offensive lineman, here's a guy, left tackle, but he's played every position down the offensive line, and he's played them pretty damn well. This is the most Green Bay type of offensive lineman Green Bay could ever, write up. Mean has played every single position. You can really plug him in anywhere. He's good at stacking up to the second level. He's a good pass protector. He's got a great base. I mean, this is a prototypical lineman that the Packers hunt for, that every team also hunts for, with the Packers being specifically a team that targets those versatile linemen. Zabel's he just fits the bill perfectly. Likely sliding inside in the NFL just due to absurdly short arms, 32 inches roughly, which, especially for offensive tackles, we're talking way below the thresholds of acceptable. It's low in general, having his short of arms, so he's definitely going to be kicking inside to guard, but he has played center, so that is, again, he's kicking inside, but there's still 3 positions he can play and has played. Being that he's also not just a really good pass blocker, he's shown a ton of ability climbing to the second level and has been great in both zone blocking and combo blocking schemes, which is going to be an asset. If he can get onto a team that is a zone block heavy scheme, he's probably going to start really quick, and he's going to be an asset. And he should take to NFL coaching fast as well, just being a matured player. But moving over to some other positions, again, not positions Green Bay is likely to target in round 1, just given history. They have a wide receiver in round 1 for Green Bay. It's unlikely, but that said, there's a very real case to be made that Green Bay does go again and draft a receiver this draft. Should they make any moves up until that point, that might make this a moot point. Right off the bat, let's talk about Jalen Royals. 15 touchdowns last season, setting a Utah State record. But really feels like we're just scratching the surface with this player. Roughly 2,000 yards in the last season and a half. I mean, showcased just great nuance as a route runner, prowess as a route runner. Has wicked footwork, release package that, I mean, a team can dream of, and just so smooth and dynamic with seemingly like every move he makes. He's just been impressing. The more and more he shows up on tape, the more teams get to look at him, the more positive takeaways there's been about Jalen Royals. Senior Bowl week was nothing different. And really, when I think about him and what he could be in the Packers offense, he really is a blend of all of the Packers wide receivers, in a sense, just packaged into one, if you think about it. So very, very good with the ball in his hands, very Jaden Reed-esque in that sense. He can bring down a lot of the tough passes like a Watson or Dobbs can, and then he's just a high-level, above his age type of route runner already, similar to Wick. So he's kind of bringing everything into one here, but that is one of those things, like, again, unless they make a move, where do you fit him in at this point? Who do you get rid of? Who do you phase out to get in the Royals? But that said, he has some fun back shoulder catches and some plucks out of midair on tape. But it's also had a few moments of weaknesses, not securing the contested catches, something he's definitely going to need to develop for sure. Biggest issue there is the fact that in 2024, more teams were playing him tighter in coverage, a little stickier, and the 2024 contested catch production took a little hit from 23 when he was seeing a bit more space to work with, not as pressed as often. So will be definitely a test for him. But he showed up in the Senior Bowl week. He definitely proved any kind of doubts wrong to this point. He has great size at 210 pounds. He can be a yards after catch. He is a yards after catch machine, but also wins downfield, which also makes him so valuable and just a special all-around talent. He's a guy who's going to come in probably as a late second round, early third rounder at this point. Definitely could continue to go up boards. Does remind me of Jaden Reed in the sense of, like, he kind of started out in that third round-ish area coming out of the season, and then through the Senior Bowl, through the Combine, just events happening, found his way into a second-round prospect by the time it's said and done. Royals feels very similar to Jaden Reed in that sense. Other players who continue to fly up the board, I know another Packer favorite here is going to be Jalen Noel out of Iowa State, receiver. He's been another big name. Him and his teammate Higgins out of Iowa State, both big name for the Packers to potentially target this year. Noel specifically was recognized as the best wide receiver on the national team after Senior Bowl week. A huge winner, along with Jack Bash, probably the biggest receiver winner of the Senior Bowl. His production over at Iowa State ticked up every single year. I think the thing that's going to make Noel stand out this class is just footwork and the fluidity in his footwork and his moves. He's just a savant, crisp route runner, arguably beyond his years, very similar to Royals, but Noel might be the best route runner in this class, besides maybe like a Tez Johnson. But just very seamlessly can transition into a weapon as a ball carrier. gets vertical very fast. So again, this is just going to be a dynamic gadget type of player that can do a lot for an offense if he can get plucked into the right system, right schemes, potentially a scheme like Green Bay that knows how to use those guys. But again, there is Jayden Reed there already. So does Noah make the most sense? Not so sure. But again, we're covering the winners from the Senior Bowl positions backers need, and he happens to be one of them. He might be limited to a slot role, 5'11", 220 pounds. I mean, just stacked, but not that big. Doesn't have the outside guy type of frame, and he's also struggled with physicality as well, including with the ball in his hands. He really relies on his agility a lot, which is amazing, but can go down pretty quick. Not really a downfield burner either, or an asset as a blocker. The blocking things, whatever. But Green Bay does value that quite a bit. That said, he can be used in the short area to be a dynamic weapon for a team, and he projects as a very high-level gadget player right off the bat. Would be great value in round 3. Will probably continue to climb his stock as the draft process goes on. Speaking of people climbing stocks, kind of tapped on him already, but Jack Bech, TCU, we all know the story, the tragic story about his brother. He's playing for something bigger at this point. It's unfortunate, but when you're playing for something bigger, it does give a player an edge. As much as they don't want that edge, he has it. He plays for something bigger. David Carr was talking about that after the Senior Bowl game, kind of what that means from a player's perspective. And Bech having that is definitely an asset, an unfortunate one, but it's something he lives with now. He did break out in 2024 with over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, after being practically non-existent in TCU's offense in 2023. Came into Senior Bowl week this year, takes home MVP, had a strong Senior Bowl game with 6 for 681 and the game-winning touchdown there. The thing that's awesome about Bech that like any team is going to be in love with is he's very comfortable going over the middle. He's a big body with a large catch radius and has speed. 6'2", 215. I know there's people out there comparing him to similar to Puka. Not sure I want to go that entirely far yet, but in terms of what he does with his skills, it is very Puka-esque, having the big body and just being reliable as hell as a pass catcher. As seen by an impressive 83.1 receiving grade this last season with PFF, and his obvious Packer traits is a 74.5 PFF run block grade is just spectacular. One of the best in the nation, one of the top marks in the nation. Obviously, Green Bay loves a pass blocker. He might be most fitting as a team's number 3 guy. He's very much a go get it. He's a get a bucket. If we have to use an NBA reference, he's a get a bucket type of receiver. He's very good and reliable with his hands. And then when you get in the run blocking, there's going to be ways teams are going to want to use him right off the bat, even if it's not as the top of the depth chart of the receiver. He's still, his physicality, his willingness, he's going to be an asset for a team pretty early on. And he has the versatility to kind of line up in a few spots on the offense as well. He does lack breakaway speed, though. Gives Allen Lazard vibes. Love it or not, gives Allen Lazard vibes in the sense of big, physical, can block, doesn't have breakaway speed, pretty reliable, will go over the middle. The thing about Bech, he's also a zone coverage killer, but he does struggle to get off man coverage. That said, where he's not getting off coverage well, he makes up for with the strong hand. Just throw it at him. He's probably going to still come up with the pass or with the catch. Moving on then to Savion Williams, another teammate out of TCU who's kind of been rising himself. His draft stock's been going up. Not going to spend a ton of time on Savion, but he's got Deebo Samuel-esque qualities to his game. 220 pounds. No cornerback wants to tackle this cat. Led all receivers with 43 missed tackles, taking snaps at running back and receiver this year. He's just fun as hell to watch when the ball is in his hands, but he does have issues with drops. Green Bay does not need more of that. He definitely needs to develop more. He's not really got the skills to be an outside receiver in the NFL right now. Used a ton in screen passes, flank passes in TCU this last season, averaging less than under 7 yards average depth of target. So again, there's a lot of those flat passes, screen passes, and does have a bit of the crossing routes as well. Just whatever to maximize getting him the ball right away and let him start move. He did have a good showing in the Senior Bowl. He is kind of rising up those boards, creeping a little bit. And again, he's just going to be another dynamic gadget type player that a team in the right system could really get a lot out of early. Some similarities to Laviska Shenault. He could be very hit or miss like Shenault as well, but he has the qualities that a team looks for in terms of that gadget, someone that just adds a little different element to your game, that you get him the ball quick. And he very well might transition to a running back type of guy in the NFL, very Ty Montgomery-esque. I mean, again, that's where he dominated. And if the team wants to use his skill set to the best of their abilities, it's getting him the football right away. And that could mean taking snaps as a running back or very Cordell Patterson-esque. I mean, it's not out of the realm. That's the type of role Savion Williams will play at the NFL. Could be a fun third, fourth round pick for a team, but definitely has a ways to go in terms of building a complete skill set. And then lastly, Quincy Riley, Louisville cornerback. Of course, Gutekunst is 1-for-1 drafting Louisville cornerbacks with Jair Alexander, but Quincy Riley has played 5 years in college, 15 interceptions, 40 pass breakups. So he's got a lot of college production. You really know what you're getting with him. He was an absolute blanket all Senior Bowl week, made some really nice sideline plays. And again, just another guy with a knack for kind of never being out of a play. If he gets behind, he has to work back. He always finds a way to put himself in a really good position before the ball arrives. So just very good in that sense. It should make a really nice third round type of draft pick. Some of the Packers can, again, kind of sit back, let the board fall to him, hit him in the third round, take other spots earlier. That said, there might just be enough good cornerbacks and good defensive tackles this class to where the Packers kind of capitalize early there. Maybe not looking at corner or defensive tackle in the third round like with the Norman Lott or the Quincy Rileys of the world. But there's certainly options this year, similar to wide receiver. These are kind of the guys who stood out at defensive tackle, and receiver that should be most relevant to the Packers coming up in those second, third, fourth round type of draft picks. Some guys to keep an eye on as they continue to climb up the boards this NFL draft season.